as we get into, and we've been having conversations around elections and seeing certain things that are happening as concerns preparedness, and we will have that conversation this hour. Joining us in the hot seat is the National Coordinator of the Elections Observation Group, ELOG, and that's Mulle Musau. Mulle, good morning.
Good morning to you, Undu.
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
The last time we had a conversation with you was around, preparations towards the elections that brought in this current administration. So it's been a minute.
It's been quite a minute, and so much has happened ever since. We since ended up not even having a commission at all. So I think now we are trying to set up one so I can be able to prepare ourselves for the next elections.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, questions as to whether it's too soon or the road to 2027 is going to make a part of this conversation today when we talk about are we ready. But let's welcome you to the show first of all with a proverb. CT will tell you where it's from, and then you can share your interpretation of the same with us.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week are from the Republic of Mozambique. When you visit the cemetery, you cannot weep for everyone.
When you visit the cemetery,
you cannot weep for everyone.
You weep for yourself. Only you understand what you have to weep about. Yep. That's my interpretation.
Or if you're in a cemetery, you know the person you're going to weep.
Yes.
For.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, we're getting in, of course, the talk, you hear what politicians say, and we can't run away from it. You hear what the current president is saying and is up and about around the country. Many say it's visiting development projects, but look, it's electioneering and it's campaign season. It has already started, and we're now starting to look at the road towards 2027. Finally, commissioners, chairperson and the deputy are then having been seen through the nomination and then, the inquiry process in terms of whether they're fit to serve. And that we've seen, they said that by the end of April, we would have now an IEBC in place. Let's wait and see, because April ends next week. But then we're on the road to 2027, and we're asking the question, are we ready? But let's start with the question before that. Is it too soon to ask if we are ready?
I think my first remark should be that I think Kenyans keep forgetting the fact that we have made it a tradition in this country to campaign forever, so that when you say is it too soon, I think that's already overtaken by events, because we start the conversation about the next elections or the campaigns immediately the last one ends, and the road and the campaigns begin in one fashion or another, whether it's through the government or through the opposition parties or through the environment that we create, especially after those elections. We have a situation which we call a permanent campaign mode. So we've been campaigning. So now that we suddenly start speaking about 2027, that conversation began a long time ago. And right now, I think the one which is mainly shaping that conversation is the fact that after 2 years or so, we are trying to set up a commission that can be able to be the focal point for the preparations that will take us to 2027.
So, when we look at certain things that are happening in the country at the moment, there has been no IEBC for all intents and purposes of its function since the last election. And even at that, there were, it was hopping along maybe on one leg. And so finally now, we could have one in the next, give or take a couple of weeks or a month or so. What then would be the process that would take place thereafter to then say that we're getting all the gears oiled and the wheels, turning towards an election? And we're talking about brick and mortar now.
Well, I think the first things first. So many things have been overtaken by events as we speak. We have a big issue called the boundary delimitation process, which was never ever undertaken because we never had a commission. We have now quite a number of by-elections, parliamentary, MCA level elections which need to be conducted because those people by right need representation in the houses of decision making, and therefore that should be among the first agenda that a new commission coming in place must handle. So the two hot issues which will set up the agenda for IBC. One will be the conduct of those by-elections, and secondly, settling the question of the about boundary review, because our constitution demands that as the laws are at the moment, boundaries are supposed to be reviewed every 8 to 12 years. The law has not changed. We've already been overtaken by the time lapsed last year. So that question must be answered one way or the other, because we'll not be able to move to that new election without handling or at least settling that. There are proposals in Parliament. I would expect the new commission will be able to push for a decision in terms of are we going to change the laws to accommodate therefore more time, or do they we have had the secretariat which is in place saying that they have done enough to ensure that boundaries can still be reviewed before 2027. So I think the new commission must sit and make decisions about that aspect of the preparation. Then the rest of the other roadmap basically we start counting down in terms of what are the other things that need to be done before 2027. Remember, we have a technology in IBC which must be reassessed, reviewed. There have been proposals about buying new technology. Our argument has been that if you're going to have any new technology, first, that must be canvassed with the people of Kenya. Secondly, we must have enough time to be able to pilot, to test, and assess. We must also ensure that the procurement process is transparent, because you do not want to have the same questions about the Camagos and the Venezuelans and Smartmatic and the kind of questions that we had the last time. So that has to start in earnest. The political parties themselves have to start being prepared for that. Remember, they also have a calendar of activities that they have to do before their own internal elections, before we even come to the nomination processes, which will be happening early in 2027. So, and then of course there is also the training, the inducting of the new commission. I would expect it to be among the first things that they do, because unless they come well prepared, they still have to hit the ground running. But we still have to train them and induct them into the process, considering that we have the secretariat which has been in place and is much more experienced than them, and therefore they have to be up to speed when they take over or they take office. Yeah.
There is this 90-day period that our laws state is a time within which a by-election must be held. When we've had situations where members of parliament have been given new responsibilities in the executive, if that period lapses, would you then not say that the citizens of that particular constituency have had certain fundamental rights that are due to them because of representation abrogated? And when that happens, what then do we do?
First, we must be I think we need to be very clear in terms of what we mean by democracy. Because if we say that democracy is about people making decisions through, in our fashion of democracy, through representation, then there's not supposed to be any opportunity where residents of a certain constituency are not represented when decisions are being made. Forget even about the laws. It's just a principle that throughout there must be representation, because that's how we make decisions. So from a legal point of view, I think the lawyers will argue that the process involves the Speaker of the respective house writing writs that there's a vacancy, and then that is communicated to the commission, a commission which does not exist because we don't have the commissioners. Although again, somebody must ask Gachagua and that process, which commission then made decisions. But it's supposed to be, the question is supposed to be that we are supposed to be sending it to the commission then accepts, and therefore now that law starts getting into effect, because once the commission gets the official writs from the Speaker, that official period begins, the 90 period. But that is still not addressing the question of the abrogation of the rights of these citizens. We know, for instance, that there was a citizen from Banisa constituency who went to court. We are still yet, and some part of that is what pushed the issue of fast-tracking the process of settling up on a panel. last year. That was early last year. But that was the issue of the rights was still not addressed. And therefore, for me, I think that's a serious abrogation of the rights of those particular people. And I think somebody needs still to go to court to be able to press for the addressing of that particular issue.
When you talk about the matters to do with by-elections in these constituencies, I remember we had a conversation with the senior counsel in this studio, and he said, when it comes to issues to do with the representation, you look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture being the government, the national assemblies, business will go as usual.
Yes. The
residents who do not have representation, you don't have representation, but I'm sorry, the government has to move on. So in terms of these, in terms of making sure that these residents have a representation, because you say the rights have been abrogated.
Yes,
it's fine, but then again, there is the bigger picture of the government has to move on.
The way we structured our laws. Your only option as things stand is for those citizens to go to court and fight for their rights. And as you said, without that being then done or something being forced on the government will continue doing what it will say that we have to continue functioning. But let me give you examples from elsewhere on how people handle the same issue. In the Scandinavian countries, and quite a number of other countries also, when for one reason or another the elected representative does not or is not available to be able to represent the people, they have established a framework where the one who came in second sits in, at least to be able to listen to the issues which are being canvassed within that house and be able to make submissions. The only thing that they are not allowed to do is to make a vote, but they make their contribution. So they are heard. Those people are heard. So in Scandinavia, Sweden in particular, they have a framework where the one who comes in second is able to, irrespective of the party. When they come there, they don't even come now as a party representative. They come there to represent the people because they were part of an election where people made a decision about who was going to represent them. They came in second or they came in third. So if the second is not available, they're able to go to the third. So we can be able to assume such a practice within our in our countries, so that at no point, because it's already now very, very clear that we can even sabotage representation. All the shenanigans, in my view, which have happened so that we do not have a commission in place in time, have basically contributed to the fact that we have sabotaged the rights of citizens in a number of constituencies, in a number of ward assemblies. So I think we need to review how we understand this practice of representation so that moving forward, that can be addressed because that's a gap.
Is it an understanding or just, a complete decision to ignore what the right thing is to do and just to actually implement what the law says? Because we talk about third, fourth, fifth schedules of the Constitution and its implementation, right? But then here are very basic things. I mean, it's clear. It must be done. In order for B to happen, A must be in existence. So it appears to be a systemic issue that when we look at other jurisdictions, which we often must do when we play the game of comparison, where you want to talk about issues that they may have corruption, whatever you want to do, but there's systems in place that no matter what, you can say this is supposed to run in this manner. B cannot happen if A is not in place. Why does it seem so difficult to then get A in place? We took years to put together a constitution, promulgated it for the world to see, and then have decided along the line, okay, well, we're just not going to implement it because, who cares? So here we are saying that the Constitution says people should be represented at any one time, all the time. They have the right of representation. You don't have a body in place that is supposed to ensure that right, but then you choose not to put the body in place. For me, it's beyond just understanding, but just really getting down to it and doing it.
Yeah, and well put. And it's not even that we don't have even institutions in place. What is the Office of the Ombudsman doing in the first instance? I mean, that's the one which is supposed to be addressing the plight of Kenyans, or at least asking those particular questions, even within government. That we have people, we have citizens in this country, they're not being represented. So there, and it all. My summary has always been, as I've said even before in other conversations, it's just pretty bad manners, simple bad manners, and there's nothing else. It's just political bad manners in this country, because what makes it difficult for us to be able to replace a commission whose time comes to an end? We have very stipulated schedules about how the process is supposed to go. That is clear. If there are any gaps, people can move fast to address any of the emerging gaps, and within reasonable time. And in fact, even in law, where there is no time, and the argument has been made over the years, I think from jurisprudence, that when you say within reasonable time, that basically means around 3 months or so that you never ever go beyond what you would consider reasonable time, even when there's no clear definition of the time of the period which is supposed to be taken to address a particular issue. So it's just because people have not submitted themselves to the practice of democracy. The people who are, I think the people who are in power right now, if you look at many of them, those people who are fighting that new constitution anyway. So that, I mean, if you look at the camps as they sat in the referendum, there are people who are on the other side, and therefore the implementation of that constitution is not going to be very easy for those people, or at least for the others who would want to see it implemented. You don't have the right people in place to be able to ensure that it is done efficiently and it is observed.
Yet when we talk about even these by-elections that need to happen, we need a commission that is in place. But look at the exercise that is in place right now to put these the commissioners in office, and the politics that played around in setting up these, both camps giving suggestions on who is to sit in this panel. And one would argue they go there with a directive on what it is they want to do, which begs the question on the credibility and integrity of the commission that would come into place, because it is politics being played.
You know, we argued when the first panel was set up, I think it was early last year, we argued that panel should have been let just to do its job. But no, we had to ask ourselves, are we included? Different people had to ask themselves whether they are included in that particular process. With a broad-based, you know, say bread-based, but you could be. But with a broad-based government that we have in place, where are those people now? Are they not on the same side? When they were fighting and saying, you know, we need to be included, so that politically you can be able to say no one political group was involved in the determining who was going to sit in the panel. Are they not now on one side when you think about it from a political point of view? So then who is now left out? Should there be somebody else now also arguing that we have been left out, we are not part of the process of forming the panel? So this was neither here nor there, and we were saying, let that panel just go sit. We are going to interrogate the process through which they are going to start vetting the candidates, or go to do the interviews, and we're also going to interrogate those who are going to be recommended for the positions of the commission, so that it does not really matter now who really sits in that panel, because it's just basically optics. But those optics keep changing. We have such a fluid environment in terms of our politics that you cannot be very sure that this is a camp which is going to be there on this side by the time a year turns. You know, so I think for me the question about the interests which have been created in do not make sense. What we need to do is just to say, let's have a panel. Like now we do have a panel. Let that panel try to go through the process in a manner that makes sure that the process is credible. We have already asked questions about, for instance, the 6 names which were added. That was a big issue. It is a big issue. Yeah. You can't just release to the members of public 116 names and then suddenly they become more. 11 and then 105, and suddenly there are 6 more, and they are coming from nowhere, and you don't know the criteria which has been used. This needs to be communicated. We've written to the chair. We have not received any responses as far as that is concerned. That process just needs to be transparent.
Can it though? Can you talk about a transparent process when the selection of the panel itself is thought to have had some political skew? in the very first place, we already saw that there were political parties, groups who said, well, my person has to be on that panel. Can you truly have a transparent process when even the selection of people who sit on the panel making decisions are said to have some kind of political influence?
You know, I've always anchored our electoral processes, all of them, whether it's a panel formulation, whether it is the conduct of IEBC, whether it's the political parties, how they engage, on Article 86 of the Constitution, which says the system, whatever system is used, it needs to be simple, as a first weighted value, accurate, secure, verifiable, transparent, and accountable. That summarizes the score, what we should score our electoral processes on. So the minute you find a complicated process in this country, and we've lived in this country long enough to see, the minute you start seeing opaqueness, or you start seeing the complicated processes, things which are taking people on winding paths, there is always something wrong. And therefore, we never had we never had the commissions in time. We couldn't set the panel on time. We had to have a bipartisan process called NADCO to be able to address some of the issues that had been raised, even from different quarters. After that, we still had a panel, which was, again, there was contentious issues about who was going to nominate who. They went to court. They stalled the process for months on end. So already, the picture, and which is what we were trying to tell the chair of the panel in a statement that we released, was that you already now have an environment which people do not feel very confident about. Why would you want to continue increasing the same issue? I mean, making it more murkier as it moves forward. And yet, over time, most of us, the people who the commentators on our Kenyan elections, have argued that trust is the number one issue that needed to be, restored in terms of our electoral process. And how do you do that? You engage them. It's supposed to be a people process. This is supposed to be a very difficult process. The examples which people can use in terms of how we conduct elections. If you go to a village when people are playing football, those days when you were young, and would go to a field and we'd say, who do you want to run this? Who do you feel should be the referee for the match? We would agree on somebody. And a lot of the times it will be somebody we both teams feel we are very confident on that person. We've done those simple decisions at the village level. We come to the national level. The big question becomes, do we trust this person that we have elected, or do we trust this person who has been given the responsibility to be able to run our elections? And that is always the problem. So I think it's something, the political bandman, and that's why I go back to the elite politics is what changes everything, because it's basically a kind of a conspiracy against the people. If the elections are supposed to be people-driven, let them just be people-driven. Make it transparent, make it open, explain everything along the way, and then over time, as we saw with the Isaac Hassan, the interim commission, when Isaac Hassan was there, when they started transmitting election results on those screens in different polling stations, people started saying, wow, this can be a very easy process, and this can be actually a very transparent process. Isaac Hassan was given a lot of praise for that particular process that they did. But later on, of course, things change when, again, we start seeing, clandestine activities in a process which is supposed to be people-driven.
It's supposed to be people-driven, and getting us to a people-driven process seems to be taking some time. I'd like us to take a break and then come back and look at how do you actually move these processes to where people are the center and actually the drivers of those processes. But it seems, and that all has to do with democracy. When we talk about it, it's all one of the tenets of democracy. And when it comes to election, it should be the people that should be at the center of it. But how do you get there? Because clearly in Kenya, that's not the case. It's not a people-driven process. It seems that the elections are in the hands and for the control of a few. How do you flip the script?
Well, in my view, the first thing is just adherence to the law, the people's law. The people's law is a constitution, and I think within that constitution and the other laws, attendant laws, we have very elaborate frameworks for how to be able to engage the people. I've just cited Article 86 as a focal point because when we talk, for instance, when you talk about simple systems, they need to be systems so that every peasant in the country can be able to understand. If you're going to do voter registration, you're going to do a voter education, you're going to do the voting process itself, it needs to be a simple process that people can understand. And I've often used the example of Gambia, where I say that the Gambians agreed to use marbles rather than ballot papers because they understand it. The people understand marbles in a very simple way. So when we start using complicated technology, that people don't understand how this technology reads my thumb, then translates that identification into a vote, then that vote transmitted into a portal that is supposed to be counted at Bomas. That's a very complicated process. I think one of the things which I want to agree with a number of commentators is that we need to, Bomas just needs to go, number one. You know, get Bomas out of the picture. Take the election and the election closer to the people. Let's start getting these results as close as to the people as possible. The idea of, I mean, we already have a law that has confirmed that elections or the results of the polling stations are final. So why are we not trying to aggregate the results at the lowest possible level?
Are we not doing that?
Well, what the process that we all wait for, or the process that everybody waits for, is usually the Bomas one to tell you that this is a process. But we have the 290 constituencies. Form 34 Bs are aggregate, as Mzee says here. The question of the tabulation of the constituency is done, but is it announced? No, it's not announced.
No. Let's not start with B. Let's start with 34A.
No, that's 34. What we do with 34A is this: that we get a 34A, the polling station.
Yes.
That's final.
Yes.
Okay, and that is transmitted both electronically and physically to a national tallying center.
Yes.
So and then we have the 34B being which is derived, the aggregation of the 34As in the constituency level. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now the issue that I'm trying to raise in terms of, it's not even, is the mystique of Bomas. Not so much of we don't even do the process at the constituency level. It's this issue of we all seem to be all waiting for a national announcement at some center. And therefore there's a lot of, mystery around how, as if it is not a very clear.
That's the practice.
Yes.
But is it in tandem with the law?
Well, as far as the last elections is concerned, IEBC followed the law in terms of ensuring that the election results go to the National Tallying Center. What I was trying to say, there is a National Tallying Center in terms of the establishment of different polling stations within our laws and within our statutes. I was proposing that rather than have that, can we lower this story? Can we move to the constituency level and say, let's get the aggregations. Once we get the aggregations and this constituency voted this way, all the results are available, then the tabulation process is something which can be even done in a boardroom for IEBC, but when you think about it.
I don't know. The way I see it, if it is so clearly stated that the election at the polling station is final, okay? What then stops these politicians who keep taking us to the Supreme Court and all these things and the drama that goes along with it? What stops them from having sufficient agents? What stops us, the media, for ensuring we have sufficient legs and feet and eyes in the polling station so that as this thing moves along, by the time it is declared that all polling stations have finished the elections, you have an idea of who it is.
I mean, let's even go further in the sense that let's open it up and devolve it even further, such that once it's announced, the media is allowed to call it the same way it happens in the US. But is it a preserve for the chairman?
No, it is not. Let me tell you why it's not. And City is very clear that technically all that is possible. Yes. Our data first shows that no political party has ever had the muscle to be able to deploy 100%. That is, I'm just saying. Just wait a minute. I'm just talking about now from data point of view. And I also know that the question about media is that the media can also be able to cover for this. In terms of the practice itself, City, that what you're saying is totally achievable. Has it ever been achieved or attempted? Remember, even in the last election, when Azimio and even the other side, Kenya Kwanza, they all stated to the members of the public that we are going to make sure that in all the polling stations, 46,229 of them, we're going to have agents. They never had. We have data to show that they never had that. That's number one. Media tried also to ensure that they have data from every polling station. And remember, there is also the fact that this Form 34 is Chebukati and team did us some good in terms of they also send those forms on the portal, but the forms are also fixed at the doors of every polling station, so they're accessible. From a practical point of view, it is accessible. The Form 34A, which has been declared at the polling station, is accessible to everybody. The means by which it is accessible and the practice of how to make it accessible has been the challenge.
Right.
So those are the issues that, if I was thinking from a people point of view, I would be saying, what mechanism? You remember, let me tell you what the argument that Chebukati, in my view, and what he was when he explained the issue to us. There was a judgment, I think by Chacha Mwita, if I'm not wrong, that there cannot be two results.
Yes.
The result is one. Why? Because in the polling station, that's the final result. Yes. Anyway, so we cannot have a transmitted one, which is different from what we have.
Because essentially, it's what is in the polling station that you now put into the system.
Now, that is the reason why Chebukati and team decided they're going to scan it. The scanning came from there. So we are not changing anything as is. We are going to scan this form. This is a form that you'll find in the portal.
Therein lies the problem.
Yeah, okay.
The transmitting of it, you scan, you are transmitting.
Yes.
We understand.
Yes.
But scanning comes with its own problems. What do we know is being scanned?
Now, that is now a question for confirmation when there is a dispute over an issue.
Yes, that is my preliminary question.
Yes.
Is it then legal? Is it legal to scan the document? Does our constitution state with clarity and detail how the transmission must be done?
No. Those are the questions that must be interrogated, because what our laws say is that there must be an electronic. There's an electronic transmission that is there. That's provided for in the Elections Act. That there's electronic transmission. So now the determination of the electronic transmission becomes the issue. And what my understanding.
An electronic transmission, the process of scanning and sending, is it electronic?
Is an SMS an electronic transmission?
It is.
It is.
Then it is within the law.
Yes, it is. It is electronic transmission. That's what I'm saying. You see, remember if you go back to the Supreme Court and the decisions and some of the arguments which are there, where there was an argument that do we know whether these forms are being trapped in the air, they're being downloaded? Remember those kind of stories. Yeah. those issues were coming up because there are people who are trying to poke holes on every of those processes. I think IBC did the right thing in that regard, in my view, that the idea of scanning and sending them to the portal and then subjecting them to the access of everybody who wanted to go to the portal and even compare, because remember, observers, we have copies of some of the results. Media has copies of some of the results. We have party agents. So when you have one portal where you can be able to say, let me go and check for this particular Mamiloki Primary School polling station, I want to see whether that is the same as the one which appears in the portal, you have the opportunity to be able to do it.
And when you look at it, it should be the same across the board.
Exactly.
So I tend to think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the problem here is not objective. The problem is subjective.
Exactly.
In the nature that the distrust that is rampant from point A to Z is what causes the problem. And that's why in Kenya, the media then cannot call a result because people are going to ask the question, well, how are we sure that this is authentic? Where is it coming from? Who are they? In jurisdictions where the media calls the result, and that's why I go back to that original question where I had asked about systems. When the media in the US, for example, is calling the result of an election, people are clear that, this has been collected. Even if you go back and check, it's going to be the same across board because the system from the beginning has been set up to ensure that there is no hanky-panky in here.
But exactly. Do you know where
so that's why you can call it. CNN can call it, Fox News can call it, CBS can call it.
Access.
Yeah, KTN try and call it, and people ask you, who told you?
True.
We have to wait.
But you know where again the waters get muddier Physical forms are supposed to be brought
To confirm.
to confirm.
Yes.
And there have been arguments that there's disparity.
But this is the problem, that this thing of insistence on confirmation still comes from the subjective distrust that we're talking
Yes.
about. Because if the result at the polling station went through a system that was clean, clear, proper, there would be no need for this insistence on this confirmation.
Under the issue of that particular one is not subjective. Why? Because it's a requirement of the law. It's something that and even if you go back to 2017, where there were questions about the transmission again and the physical results became a subject of discussion in the petition, the law requires that the physical there's a process of verification. Now
At
that
the
process
polling station?
at the national tallying center, because you've gotten these results electronically. When the commission made the attempt to announce, remember in 2017, when they announced the results before all of them had come in, that was a major contention point because of the argument was, did you then verify? Are you sure then they were the same? So trust is a big issue, of course, in the room, and it's a subjective issue that people don't want trust. The question that you're asking about KTN, why do we get the results, is because people do not trust each other.
Exactly.
But the access to those results is provided. My argument is that IEBC can go one step further to trying to resolve the issue. Just the way they went the last time and said, okay, we learned in 2017 that if we sent data, because in 2017 what they had done is that they were keying in the results, and people asked them, where are you getting these results from? These are just statistics. So now they went a step further and said, no, we'll just scan the form as is, then we'll have the opportunity to be able to confirm whether it's the right
So
form.
why, Musau, would you get different results? Because it's not what we do on election night here. Is that when, and I think about the same thing also in Nigeria, when you start to see the results start to stream in, you flip from here and the discrepancy is unbelievable. It's 200th, or is it that the transmission is slower? Are there different numbers? That's why you can have a sheet somebody saying this and a sheet somebody saying something else. If you did a split screen of the election that took place in November in the US, did a split screen between Fox, CBS, CNN, the numbers were the same. The red were red, the blue was blue. In all, it was the same. It didn't matter which news channel you went to. So where's the problem whereby CT News will have one number, Dennis Updates will have another number, and we're wondering, is this the same country?
Yes,
Access.
that's Kenyans practicing diversity.
But basically, it's access. You know the Nigerian elections. I studied that electronic process because I was trying to compare it to the Kenyan one. The major problem with that was that they just decided to stop
the
process.
thing completely.
Yes.
They said we're not even doing anything
They took an
again.
electronic system to the Nigerian election.
Yes,
Proper.
a proper one.
How did that fare?
We got Tinubu.
It worked.
It worked. I'm telling you. You think it didn't work? It actually worked.
The system totally stalled. A very heavy investment, one of the most expensive also, but it stalled. And the results had to again utilize the normal channels again of getting the results. So the practice. In fact, I was doing that when I was doing that study of the Nigerian elections. I was doing it for the Ghana elections because they were asking me, can you study the Kenyan electronic transmission system and the Nigerian one and recommend for us? My recommendation was, please don't use technology
At all.
for
Use the
transmission.
Gambia way. Use marbles.
I told you guys you've been doing your elections the way you've been doing them. Please do not try to bring anything new. If you're going to bring anything new, please get it in time so that people accept it and access it over time. And you know what? One of the results of the Ghanaian election, which is very important to mention, is that in December when Ghana had elections, do you know who called the election? The opposition party called the election and said they have won. 1 hour or 2 hours later, the ruling party conceded defeat. All that time, the commission had not released their results. That
Access.
is what we are looking for.
Because
Access. Access
and
to these
trust in a
results.
system which has been set up to follow, number one, the rule of law, and then also to meet expectation when it comes to a procedure that must run seemlessly.
Yes, exactly. And let me give you an example which I saw, just one example from the Ghanaian election, which would tell you what a people-led process would look like. In the polling stations, the register of voters, the party agents have it. Each of them has a copy of the registered voters in a polling stations, so that when city comes in, we are all able to confirm
There.
that this is a voter here.
Okay.
And sometimes they can even overrule the presiding officer who imagines that maybe because they have pictures on the ballot, that this doesn't really look like city. Those guys would confirm because they're coming from the area. Say, no, we know this Mzee. We know this Mzee. He votes here. He has always been voting here. And they accept that decision. That is a level of getting the people involved in the process that they start trusting the process.
Here we are at a time where we are working to have an IEBC in place. We had a conversation here with the former IEBC CEO, James Oswago, who said at any given time we need 2 years for that commission to be in place to understand the system. But here we're talking about a new commission that is coming into place. There are matters to do with procurement, training, technology that needs to be either buy a new one or to audit the same, and making sure that the citizenry as well interact with this system to understand and get to trust the system. How many years to the election? 2 years?
Yes.
Do we have that time?
As I said when we started the program, I think we're already too late. There are too many things to be done. I don't think this commission is going to have enough time to be able to do all of them. Let them make a valiant attempt at ensuring that they can do the best they can. But one of the easiest ways to do this is work with the people. My argument has been work with the people, because that you gain the trust of the people when you start engagements with them. There's a question I used to ask the previous commission. How come the politicians go to Njurinjeke, Kaya Elders, Mamamboga somewhere, and we don't see the commissions doing the same thing, and yet they are working for the people? So that the engagement, and I'm not saying that, of course, that you're going to tell the commission go and sit somewhere in Dagoretti corner. I'm just saying, can there be an outreach? Overtures which are made with the people when you want to conduct certain activities, for instance, voter registration. People have market days. There are the nomadic communities which go all over the country. Have you established those patterns so that you can be able to work with their schedules, work within their ranges, knowing that it's very, very expensive for people to come to a constituency center to come and register? Do you make overtures for this? Of course, there are budgetary considerations, but there should be a commitment to ensuring that we approach and we get closer to the people in every of the activities that we are engaging in. That way, you will get the people first to start trusting you in the process. And some of the things which are more difficult to undertake in terms of the preparations for the elections become much more easier. You will be given much more room, even a room for error in the preparatory process, because we don't expect errors in the election itself. We say that electoral processes should be predictable, but the election results should not be predictable. Should be unpredictable. In Kenya, it is the other way around.
It is true, but then what do you do then with an electorate who go to the polling station with the results already predetermined? Because part of our problem is that we know who should win, irrespective of what the facts may be.
Or what the process dictates.
Forget process. We voted.
Yeah.
This is the person who should win.
But I think it's all about the political mobilization and the way we have cultured ourselves. Again, it's part of the bigger bad manners, which is wider than just the politicians themselves. So I think we need to go through a process of sanitizing how we understand democracy, elections, and even, because, for instance, there's something which is very interesting. Our constitution says that the one who wins just needs to garner 50 plus 1.
Yes.
People have been arguing about this difference between Raila and Ruto the last time, which is around 200,000. All you need to do, City, is to win by one vote. One. 50% plus one vote, one other person. Then you become the president of the country. I don't know whether Kenyans can deal with such a situation if it came to pass.
No.
That it was one person who tilted the scale.
No.
The one person tilted the scale. Yeah. And we accept that. Which is one of the wider reasons why we've been arguing for the change of the system from the first past the post system to a proportional representation system, where we have like the South African model, where we have, you choose parties, let them organize themselves in 2 terms of a government, but then organize it in such a way that even the opposition has something to say. Because here in Kenya, that one person who loses by one vote becomes a farmer and becomes a peasant the next day after the election. Which is very difficult to be able to accept from the culture that we have evolved through. It becomes very difficult for someone to say, how do I just go back to the village and this guy just beat me by one vote? And the people who voted, they cannot understand how they were beaten by just one vote. Something must have gone wrong. So I think there's a lot of, we must inculcate a democratic culture and electoral practice that allows us over time to understand the rules of the game, but also get ourselves systems which work for us. Because I think this first past the post or zero-sum game, as it is called in some other quarters, is not working for Kenya.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't work for this continent. It's as simple as that. Because essentially you're fermenting revolt.
Exactly.
Because the people whose person is not elected, haki, wameshika hiyo maneno na hawachili. Let me translate for those who don't understand Kiswahili.
I swear.
They will not let go because they will feel that their candidate won. Yes. And that is how you begin planting the seeds, not of discord, but of future insurrection. That way, because people feel, no, these fellows, if it happens more than once, kwani. Now you see, it's a problem that can be avoided with this fight we have for transparency.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because if, for instance, there was this talk of the server, and it was supposedly opened. There'd be no more discussion about the server.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
There are some naysayers who will still argue that is not the server. They've given us another server. But it doesn't matter. The argument will be different.
Indeed. When you look at those who have powers to alter, change, or, redirect a system, usually they sit within the government of the day. It's really difficult for you to stand up and say, well, I'm going to change the system. No, you need to have some kind of power, which oftentimes rests or is vested in government. Now, we talk about the fact that there clearly needs to be a change for us to move away from the shenanigans that we've seen easily for every election over the last 20 years. How do you do that then if you don't have political goodwill to steer that ship?
I think, there's Kenya is the Kenya civic space is very vibrant, which allows for the mobilization and consolidation of our thinking. I just think we have never really exploited it. But the other, the much more current, the much more influential group of people are the politicians. We have politicians who have gone through this process. Some of them, of course, have suffered from it, where you constantly lose power, or you are not, you're cut off from the cake, so to call it. I think these guys need to mobilize. These are the ones who need to be mobilizing. And now that we understand that Kenyans are easily mobilized along these figureheads, the conversation which is supposed to be held by political parties, especially opposition political parties, is how to make proposals about how to change the system. That would be a useful conversation for those people who are outside power, because of course the ones who are in power are enjoying it anyway. Yes. So they're not going to start that conversation. So if they and this happened, remember they changed the constitution, the one-party movement, changing the one-party to multi-party movement, had the concerted efforts of opposition figures and civil society, churches, and other actors. That is the kind of conversation I think we need to be having moving forward. That the broader civil society, which includes the church, the media, and then the opposition leaders, need to start creating these conversations and developing the memoranda that should be presented even to Parliament, so that we can be able to start changing that particular process. Whether this
who should do this again? Sorry, I missed that one.
Civil society, churches, such.
The broader civil society.
Okay.
Plus the opposition leaders.
For a moment, I thought you were saying politicians.
No. And these conversations definitely need to happen. We're on the road to 2027, whether we like it or not, whether we choose to accept it. It'll be good to have you back in the room to see what progress we're making as we go along. But we want to thank you for being here today and opening up the conversation. Mulle Musau is the national coordinator of the Elections Observation Group and has been our guest this hour.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.